Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It's Thursday. We're angling our way through another week. And today, we got to talk about Merrick Garland.
We got to talk about your birthday first, man. It's your birthday. What are you doing?
How the hell did you figure that out?
I don't know. Birdie told me.
I wasn't born. I was specially created by a special act of God. He said, what can I do to create somebody that will inflame the self-righteous and create legions of haters, blood pressure to spike? There it is. And so, I am the gift that God gave to those of you who thought they were content with the world. The perpetual fuck you that says to you is over your morning coffee, you're not all that. The guy who doesn't respond to your emails and who only notices that you poke, prod, cajole, whine, bitch, and moan about what I say, and don't bother to read your texts. Thank you for the space I rent in your head. Don't send the check, though, or that I occupy in your head. Don't send the check because it's not rent, and I'm not going to pay it. So thank you for the birthday wishes. I made it another year. As a good friend of mine said, you have to celebrate. It's another year around the sun. And I said, I've reached an age now where birthdays are no longer a cause of celebration. They're a grim reminder that time is short and what is to come. So thank you for the birthday greetings.
We'll keep it light here today. No need to dwell on the finite nature of time and our place in this wide world.
No, there isn't. So let's move on. Merrick Garland had a little bit of a hissy fit in front of a House Oversight Committee. And if ever there was a public official calling for a slapping, calling for impeachment, in my view, it's Merrick Garland. I said it on this show before. I used to feel bad for Merrick when he didn't get his nomination to the Supreme Court acted on or confirmed by the Senate in the waning days of the second Obama administration, feeling that the Senate had done him wrong. But watching his transformation of the Justice Department into an airless thug factory has made me conclude that he was unfit for the Supreme Court. And I can't imagine the damage he would have done to our institution if he were given a gavel and a robe, because I'm watching him transform the Justice Department into a factory for nitwits. We will not be intimidated, he said in response to questions by the panel. We will do our jobs free from outside influence. Yeah, that's pretty clear. Inspector Valjean. Remember Jean Valjean from Les Mis? He pursued, he pursued Jean Valjean, or he pursued Javert, Inspector Javert from. He pursued Jean Valjean relentlessly for the theft of a loaf of bread and for his escape from prison. And in the end, he was his own undoing. Javert just couldn't respond to the humanity that Valjean showed, and he jumped off a bridge into the Seine. Merrick Garland is in the waning days of what was a brilliant career, but he's become the Jean Valjean of the Justice Department. His bloodless pursuit of the January 6 protesters and the rhetoric he uses to define it suggests that he is altogether tone deaf to the realities of American politics, and that he is destroying the Justice Department and creating in the nation a rift that will ultimately be healed, because this is a history. We are a country that will endure over time, but we will endure in a different form. And people will look back at January 6th not as a threat to our democracy, which he says, and we will not back down from defending our democracy. Look at me, mommy. We won't back down. I'm brave. I'm Merrick Garland. I mean, Merrick Garland is continuing to lead a Justice Department that's prosecuting rioters for trespass. 3 years almost after the fact, and it'll go on into a fourth and fifth year, because he has vowed everybody present at the Capitol on January 6th will be held accountable. We will pursue you. We've got terabytes, hundreds of terabytes of information. We will pursue the identity of each and every person, and we'll seek a grand jury indictment, and we'll haul your ass into a federal courtroom, and we'll make you plead, or we'll try you and we'll put you in prison. Merrick, get a grip. Read some history, pal. This country was once divided in bloodshed. 600,000 Americans lost their lives at one another's hands when we fought a civil war over issues where our democracy and our nation's history truly were at stake. And you know what we decided to do after the Civil War? We decided to make a go of living together. And we decided within 3 years to repatriate almost all the rebels, people who actually engaged in bloodshed. This overheated rhetoric about saving our democracy and not backing down. Merrick, I don't understand what planet you live on. I don't understand what it is you're doing with the Justice Department. I don't understand your petty rage. Yeah, 50. Dream on, T-girl. Happy 50th, Norm. She says, I'm sitting here at my computer, 50th. My finger's been stuck on that key now for a long time.
No, like a day over 40, Norm.
A day over 40. Thank you. Yeah, well, Mike, I don't want to get distracted by this birthday chatter. Seriously, Merrick.
It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. It's cool. You should know that people care that you were born, and it's we should celebrate birthdays. So happy birthday again. You've got them coming in everywhere. Rumble over here on YouTube. Happy birthday, Mr. Pattis from Angry Dog. Other Angry Dog was in here doing the same thing. And we can get back to ignorant, pathetic Merrick Garland as one Miranda Devine.
He's not ignorant, pathetic. Merrick Garland is a brilliant man. I mean, people who know him and who served with him on the D.C. circuit and who saw him in the courthouse there, refer to him as quiet, reserved, scholarly, compassionate. He was a classmate of John Roberts, and the two of them were sort of rivals on their way up in the law, and both occupy august positions within the American legal system. The Attorney General of the United States is not Supreme Court Chief Justice, but it's a huge honor. I just don't think Merrick is worthy of it, and I do think he should be impeached. I do think that he should be held accountable for his prosecutorial decisions. Now, yesterday, when he was being grilled by Congress, he was not talking about their investigative decisions with respect to Hunter Biden. And he did so on a ground of principle, and that is that the deliberative process that prosecutors engage in is protected under the separation of powers doctrine, and they don't have to give account of how they do their job to Congress. And he's right in a manner of speaking. But here's the point Merrick missed. It took 5 years to examine Hunter Biden. It took so long that by the time they got around to concluding it, certain charges, aka tax charges that could lead a cookie crumb trail back to his daddy in the White House, were beyond the statute of limitations. But it took 5 years to do that, Merrick. But within a couple of years, you have found the means to indict more than 1,000 Americans who went to a protest turned bad. And nobody in the Justice Department has bestirred themselves to get off their overfed asses. And you know who I'm referring to over there, don't you, folks? Nobody has seen fit to get off their overfed asses and investigate interstate arson charges against BLM. You're missing the point, Merrick. You are not trying to save our democracy. You're ruining it, because the people who turned out on January 6th didn't come out to steal, to disrupt this democracy. They thought their election had been stolen. If they were wrong, they were wrong. And then the crowd snapped and violence ensued. I get it. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself, Merrick, why people turned up at that protest? Maybe they thought their country had been stolen. If not at the electoral polls, at least at some other higher level, because there were no prosecutions for interstate commission crossing state lines to commit arson when cities went up in flames in 2020. One of your bosses, Merrick, Kamala Harris, was in fact out there raising bond money for people who'd been arrested for their activities in association with the summer of violence. And plenty of Americans were more affected and more upset and remain more affected and upset about what happened in the summer of 2020 than anything that happened on January 6, 2021. And so for you to stand up there and thump your hollow little chest and claim that you're saving democracy with these prosecutions suggests that you're tone deaf and that you miss the larger point. The country is adrift, and we don't need Jean Valjean, chasing after petty criminals. Because an act of trespass is a petty crime. We don't need the top law enforcement official in this country chasing after petty criminals while he turns a blind eye to the president's son and the possibility that sitting in the White House right now is a man who is as corrupt as anything that Donald Trump did. Now, I'm not saying I like this notion of impeaching presidential candidates at will. I think the impeachment game's got to stop, and we've got to let people, do their job. But Merrick, your perversion of the Justice Department and the prosecutorial decisions you're making or not making calls into question your integrity and your fitness for office. And so I am 100% behind an effort to impeach Merrick Garland. And I find that a more compelling case than impeaching Joe Biden. I think the focus needs to be on Garland. I think the focus needs to be on the Justice Department. I think we need to know what that department is doing and why it's doing it, why it feels that it can send people to oversight committees and ignore congressional subpoenas, why it feels it necessary to prosecute executive branch officials who do the same thing. What's more, Merrick, I'd like you to be accountable on the hot squat, as it were, and telling us what's going on with confidential human sources. Oh, you're insulted that somebody disclosed an internal FBI memo about focusing on conservative Roman Catholics as potential extremists? Give me a break. What's going on with school boards across the country, Merrick? Are CHSs being embedded in local school boards so that they can report and inform on parents who have concerns about what their children are being taught? Shame on you. To appear before Congress and engage in that faux outrage, no, Merrick, no. We, the people, want better, and we demand it of you. And
listen to this from Miranda Devine's New York Post article under the heading "Ascribing Bias." And I do encourage, I had it on the screen a few minutes ago. I encourage everybody listening now to go and read that article. Although we would, I think I agree with you, Norm. I don't know that ignorant is the proper way to describe Merrick Garland, nor do I think that he is incompetent as has been said in the chat. But I do think that you're over the target right now. And here's an example, I believe. So I'm quoting from the article, ascribing bias. Quote, speaking of which, his favorite line was to point out that Weiss, whom he has elevated to special counsel despite manifest failures, was a, quote, Trump appointee. He said so 9 times. He seems to think that bias can be ascribed to prosecutors depending on which party appoints them. Presumably, he applies that logic to himself as a Biden appointee. Usually, smart people find it tedious to say the same thing 9 times in a row, but Garland seemed to enjoy it until the wonderful Liz Cheney slayer Harriet Hageman, the Republican from Wyoming, wiped the smirk off of his face. Quote, Mr. Garland, one of the things you have done and repeated over and over and over again is to point out that Mr. Weiss was appointed as U.S. Attorney by President Trump, as though that somehow inoculates him from criticism by us. Is that really how this game is played? That if someone is appointed by a Republican, then they're supposed to be on the Republican team? Or if they're appointed by a Democrat, they're on the Democrat team? You were appointed by Mr. Biden, weren't you? Are you a Democrat? Are you on the Democrat team? End quote. And Ms. Devine says, touche. He never said it again.
Well, I've often, people often, I see often in the news in discussing the decision of a high court that this justice or this judge was appointed by President X or President Y, as though it means something. And it's never meant a thing to me. I have appeared in the United States Supreme Court. I've appeared in various appellate courts around the country. I appear in courts almost daily when courts are open. This is in the pre-COVID era and now as well. The person who appointed a judge never crosses my mind in framing an issue or in evaluating how to present a case or whether it be in front of a jury presided over by a judge or to present a case to a judge or series of judges at an appellate court. Their partisan affiliation never crosses my mind. Now, call me naive, but I still believe in the rule of law, meaning there are settled rules, doctrines, and norms, no pun intended, that should adhere in a courtroom, and that my objective is to identify them, determine how to best use them to serve my client's interest, and then plead the best possible case on the law and the facts that I can to a judge. And I've never left a courtroom thinking that the person who appointed the judge mattered, or that the judge's partisan affiliations mattered. I have from time to time been disappointed in judges, and I have from time to time been in contempt of judges. But when I say that, I mean not that I've been held in contempt, but I had contempt for the manner in which they've done their jobs. And I've expressed that, and I've challenged the authority of judges to make the decisions they've had, but I do it to their face. I don't do it in some sniggling background way saying, oh, that's an Obama appointee. Oh, that's a Democrat. And
Although Biden appointees to the Supreme Court are going to be looked at in a different light, especially with the decisions that we have read in recent months following Dobbs and the UNC admissions, Harvard admissions cases.
we'll see, Mike. I mean, I'm still processing those decisions, in particular the affirmative action cases, and they raise, in my mind, a very important and lively debate about constitutional interpretation and what we, the people, are to make of those founding documents and how we react to them. And I do think that's an important thing for a senator to ask a potential justice about, because I think those commitments matter. And I do believe that presidential appointment powers matter there as well. If a president's going to select a justice that they're ideologically compatible with, that may have a foreseeable consequence in terms of their ruling. But then there are these great cautionary tales, like Earl Warren. Earl Warren wasn't appointed to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court because he was expected to be the presider over the Warren Court and its explosive expansion of rights to criminal defendants. He was regarded as a conservative. And once he took the oath and had that lifetime pledge, he was able to do what justice required. So I think that in the case of confirming at least federal judges, a searing and searching examination of a judge's judicial philosophy, that is, how he or she will choose to interpret a constitutional text, what weight they will give to intention or original meaning, history, the requirements of justice. I think identifying those various variables, looking through their writings to determine which ones they've stressed, and then asking them to be honest about their fundamental principles.
Which ones can answer affirmatively what the definition of a biological female, those sorts of things, right?
That was a political side issue. It cost me respect for Justice Ketanji Brown. She should have been able to give a straight answer, but that was a political piece of farce that serves the country poorly. But I do think that the most important attribute of a justice or of a judge is flexibility. The ability and the willingness to re-examine their own commitments, their presuppositions, and to try to make for an appointing authority or a confirming authority a forecast about how they will evolve. But as to Merrick, he is one of the dark stains on American public life right now. Justin, I see from your comments, what do I know about his career prior to becoming Attorney General, and is his actions here consistent with it? I don't know a lot about him. I've read decisions. I've spent a lot of time in the last year in D.C. and spent a lot of times with folks who know him and know about his career. And their view is that he was one of the intellectual leaders of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. A funny story: he and other judges used to compete to get the best clerks they could, and then they would say, mine's got a higher grade point average than yours, and young people would work hard to get in his courtroom because he was a man regarded to have extraordinary talent and acumen. So I think that the reputation he had as a jurist was thoughtful, quiet, committed to the rule of law, and a man of integrity who would do the right thing for the right reasons as a judge. And I'm not prepared to dispute any of that. I simply think that he has become a caricature in the Justice Department, and my head explodes when I see things like this in the New York Times. We will not back down from defending our democracy. I mean, you hear this from the lips of federal prosecutors in J6 prosecutions. It's a very top-down set of prosecutions. They take their direction from the front office, and just off the stage are senior Justice Department officials managing the courtroom presentations in each of these cases. And I've seen prosecutors look with fear in their eyes for approval to their supervisors in the audience during trial at controversial moments. The message is, that this was a stain on our democracy and it must never happen again, and that the peaceful transfer, and you see judges like Judge Kelly adopt this mantra. We've got a blemish on our history. We can never assume there'll be a peaceful transition of power again. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah. I'm literally over here biting my lip. I don't know if you I caught myself doing it there, but because I'm so sick to death, Norm, of the frivolous use of this word democracy as if it has any as if it has any pragmatic function as to how our society and how our country is actually run, right? Some sort of direct democracy, some sort of mob rule, as if there are not checks and balances on each part of our government, as if there is not some sort of Republican form of representation embodied in such things like the Electoral College, whatever else. But it's just this entire administration is replete with these very trite, frivolous use of the word democracy, fortifying democracy, defending democracy, enhancing democracy, whatever these other things are. All that really feels like to me, what I hear with that is we've got to continue to consolidate power so that we can use the weight of the mob to usher in whatever and implement whatever policies we ultimately want. Dawn says, yes, quote, dark stain, good description. Is he, referring to Merrick Garland, under orders? Is this coming from him? So I wanted to put that, and I'll put that on the screen because I had a couple of thoughts here. Number one, I am asking this in earnest. I don't have a view on this. I could probably pontificate a little bit. Was it a mistake for Trump not to support Merrick Garland for addition to the Supreme Court? In retrospect, will it be a mistake? And I ask that from the perspective of knowing that all of these people are just people. They are fallible humans. They are subject to their own whims and egos. They have the cumulative weight of their life experiences, goals, aspirations, motivations, these various things. I was struck by the way that you were describing his reputation, Merrick Garland's reputation in the DC circuit, and sort of that elite level status, both, I guess, from a performance perspective as well as an academic perspective for the clerks that wanted to be there. And I do wonder that if it was not a huge strategic error, now that we are seeing what has become of Merrick in public life as the Attorney General for the Department of Justice, immediately following basically the huge loss he took by not getting the support to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. And I wonder if he's doing more.
That he may be motivated by a certain bitterness and
or he might be a broken man. It might be an aimless, like, sort of wanton disregard for the norms and standards that he feels that he abided his entire career. And I'm assuming a lot here, so please do not, don't, this isn't written anywhere, but I'm going to support what I'm asking by also stating this. I think the most important part of our Supreme Court is the lifetime nature of the appointment. And that is because we can look historically at every single justice and we can track an evolution in what would be their partisan or political philosophy based on the arc of their personal life. And that is true of the likes of Justice William Rehnquist. I think, Norm, I've referenced him with you before. He was a conservative appointment, but by the time he stepping down from the bench, many of his opinions were quite liberal. And this is common. And I think that for someone like Merrick Garland, neutralizing the ego of needing to constantly compete for that next spot by assuming a lifetime appointment atop the highest court in the land might have just been the medicine Trump should have given him to avoid what we are now looking at in real time, which is a complete bastardization of the aim and the institution of the Federal Department of Justice.
Well, certainly that's the way it's turned out. I mean, Merrick Garland is a tragic figure. And whether what we see in his destruction of the Justice Department is the result of some sort of almost Grecian tragedy, hubris undone. I didn't get what I wanted. I'm always living in John Roberts' shadow. I'll show you. I'll be the savior of the republic. I'm all that. I should have got that job. John Roberts. You wonder in his light, in the morning when he shaves, does he nick himself and blame John Roberts? I don't know that any of this was foreseeable. I don't know, I mean, again, when you say, was it a mistake? He certainly wouldn't have been Attorney General right now. But to the degree that larger institutional factors and political factors drive these political decisions, there would have been some other tool up there. I think that for me, I have an enormous sense of personal disappointment that actually rises to the level of disgust over Merrick Garland. And so from my perspective, I believe that it's a sufficient cause to vote Republican regardless of the candidate to get that clown out of the Justice Department and to replace he and the puppets around him who are directing activities there out of office and to get new leadership in there. The Biden, we keep avoiding, or I keep avoiding talking about, the Biden impeachment thing. It's not something I've focused on yet. But yet when you look at the timeline as to the Justice Department's handling of Hunter, and you contrast that to the urgent timeline and the resources poured into the sinkhole of prosecuting people for misdemeanors at J6, you can't help but believe that politics are driving these decisions. And Merrick can sit there and bitch and moan until his panties disintegrate, that he's being independent and that the White House isn't calling his shots. I just don't believe it. If you want to talk about respect for our institutions, then get rid of influence peddlers who are trading on their daddy's name and winking at the tax code and were probably registered as or acting as a foreign agent when they're unregistered, and get rid of the cocaine residue on the tables in the White House when Hunter comes a calling, and let's get it on. I mean, if we've got a felon in the White House, and it's his son, and he's selling influence to his dad, somehow that matters a whole lot more to me than somebody standing in the steps of the Capitol chanting 1776. But Garland is pretending that the latter, the protesters, threatened democracy, threatened our republic, threatened our way of life. I just don't buy it. And he's pleading, he's in an echo chamber in D.C., pleading to D.C. jurors, dealing with friendly judges. There's not a judge well, that's actually not true. Judge Nichols, when he ruled against the government with respect to corrupt purposes, showed some independence, but even the judiciary is cowering in the wake of all this nonsense in DC. Why not judiciary try something different? How about granting one of the change of venue motions in the January 6th cases and see what happens if this case got tried, one of those cases got tried in Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, Oregon. You might be surprised because there's a whole different America out there than the one you're serving in that company town. And I remind everybody that the District of Columbia is unique geographic territory within the United States of America. It's created by the federal Constitution, and it's not a state. And it's not a state because we wanted to put our government in a place where it would be truly independent of states. The dark side of that is it's become truly independent of the kind of factors that influence ordinary people to make decisions in their ordinary lives. We've got a company town where everybody is dependent on the government, either working for it or serving it, and we're pretending that can be a fair and impartial jury in a case involving a protest turned into a riot on January 6th. And then we indulge in this ridiculous rhetoric about it being a threat to democracy and an embarrassment to the world. Folks, we had a riot one day. Power was peacefully transitioned. It will be so again. But I want, people who were present, and I've gotten to know a lot of them over the last couple of years, people who turned up on January 6th in the Capitol were asking, what happened in the summer of 2020? And they still don't have answers. And those are people who are going to remember those questions at the polling place in 2024. And I'm urging each and every one of you to get out there, focus on what's going on with the Justice Department, and vote Republican next time around, if for no other reason. And I don't care if, even if Melania Trump was running, vote Republican, just to get rid of Merrick and cleanse the palate of what's going on in DC, because it's toxic.
Before we move on, because I do think that we should take a couple of minutes, if you've got the time, Norm, to at least address this article from yesterday that we were going to get to today. But there's a couple of comments here on YouTube I just want to get to. Justin says, that was Cocaine Mitch, not Trump. I'm confused, Mike. Elaborate. severe conservative, also says, wasn't up to Trump GOP senators. Yes, I'm, not to make this something it's not, but yes, I'm aware of the procedure for how Supreme Court justices are confirmed, right? They are nominated by the executive and they are confirmed by our Congress. However, there is a reason that certain presidents nominate certain justices and marshal their political capital and resources to get certain justices appointed. It just so happens that President Donald Trump had the opportunity to confirm 3 justices during his one term. And what I'm saying is that had Trump made it clear that he supported Merrick Garland's appointment to the Supreme Court, especially, Justin, knowing that you're referencing Mitch McConnell, I think now you likely have a different view of him as a member of the Uniparty. Mitch McConnell would have fallen in line on something like that. Anyway, just wanted to clarify that, guys. I'm aware of the mechanism. I'm talking a little bit up from that.
So look, the CHS is related to this. We were meant to talk about it yesterday and didn't get to it. We run out of time here today. Let's talk about it briefly. We can always return to it again. Confidential human sources are people who work with the FBI. They are civilians who get registered by the FBI. They get vetted, they get managed, and their role is to collect information about organizations of interest to the United States government. During the Proud Boys trial, it became clear that even the Justice Department, at least the prosecutors, had no idea how many CHSs were embedded within the Proud Boys. And we fought this issue. The trial judge tried to keep us from bringing it to the jury's attention. Eventually, the door was opened, and we were trying to get answers about how the FBI goes about recruiting CHSs, how many there were, how involved they are in domestic dissent. And the Justice Department fought us tooth and nail. One day, we finally got far enough down that line that a senior Justice Department official pulled me aside after trial, and we met in a conference room, and they asked me what I wanted. And I said, what I wanted is to know how many CHSs were with the Proud Boys, embedded within the Proud Boys from late November after the election in 2020 until the riot on January 6th, because we believed that there was no plan to storm the Capitol. I still believe that. I don't believe the evidence shows that there was. And that the presence of CHSs would help prove that, because if there was a plan, presumably they would have reported it and the government would have known, and no report means evidence of no plan. But I said, so I want to talk to the person, because none of the FBI agents who attended trial as case agents had the answer to this question. And we were told that none of them would. And the reason is there is a separate unit within the Justice Department that manages CHSs. And a line prosecutor, that is a prosecutor involved in the management of a day-to-day case, doesn't have access to that list. And a regular FBI agent doesn't. This entity was created in response to the Church Committee's inquiry about COINTELPRO and the use of the FBI to disturb the left in the 60s and 70s. And it was used to protect, according to the Justice Department officials, the civil rights of dissenters. And so I wanted to know who that person was, and I wanted that person to come to trial. The Justice Department wasn't going to give me that information. They were going to fight us on it. And given the rulings that Judge Kelly was making, they probably would have won. So they offered a compromise. If we would agree not to pursue the issue any further, they'd enter into a stipulation with us that there were at least, they didn't say no more than, at least 8 confidential human sources in the Proud Boys in those months. And we were able to read that stipulation to the jury, which helped us argue our point. Along the way, however, various journalists began to disclose additional information, including in this group Alicia Powell from Gateway Pundit and other sources, that there were a lot more CHSs out there. And Roger Root, one of my colleagues in the case, who he represented together with Steve Metcalf, Dominic Pizzola, Roger had a lot of information about CHSs. And at one point he asked Judge Kelly, can you order the government to tell us how many federal agents were confidential human sources within the Proud Boys? Because we'd learned that the Metropolitan Police Department had them, and we suspected other agencies did as well. And Judge Kelly's response was ludicrous. The government's too vast and complicated to answer that question. I'm going to deny that motion. Wait a minute. Did we, the people, create an intelligence infrastructure that is unaccountable, that we can't get answers to, that when one of us is on trial and our liberty is impaired and we want to know just how many of you federal folks were rooting around under our beds, under our beds looking for what we hid there to tell Uncle Sam, we can't get answers to that? Bullshit. And so, Roots, the answer was denied as to Roots, but it will not be denied in the long run. We're getting prepared in our office here to file an FOI request of the FBI to get additional information on confidential human sources. And I'm making it one of my missions in the months and years to come to get a comprehensive set of answers on that. And what we learned from the FBI may well serve as a template to use with the Department of Homeland Security, to use with the Metropolitan Police Department, to use with the Central Intelligence Agency, to use with the Secret Service, to use with any of the dozens of security agents that infest the Capitol and potentially infest our national lives in ways that don't serve our liberty and that don't serve our interests. And so, the notion that this week the FBI does not know the number, that's bullshit. They do know the number. And for them to, anybody to assert they don't is a lie. There is a separate unit. Each CHS gets a number. There is a policy that govern, you get a registration number like your social security number. They are vetted. They get a handler. There are reports on pre-printed forms that need to be processed for each person's management, handling, and recruitment. Somebody has those answers. And, one of my deep, deep disappointments in Jim Jordan and the House Oversight Committee is all that information is right there. All they got to do is ask for it and demand answers, but they keep getting distracted with sideshows. CHSs are a big deal. I say we're at a critical moment in American politics that resembles where we were in the 1970s when the FBI was trying to undermine Martin Luther King and others by sowing discord and dissent among left-wing groups. I say they're doing it to the right now. And if you don't adopt the mainstream mantra, if you don't adopt the mantra that American life is pervaded by systemic racism, if you don't, if you question climate change, if you advocate for medical freedom, you're suddenly referred to as an extremist and a threat to the norm, a threat to the regime. And those threats need to be monitored and examined, lest they become what? Powerful? And what makes that any different from how the FBI was treating the left in the 1970s? Remember this, we might never know about COINTELPRO if a group of citizens didn't break in to the FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania, rifle through its safe, and collect documents that proved what the FBI denied publicly. That is, they were surveilling American political views because there were some views that were deemed too dangerous to law enforcement. And those weren't views that led to the promotion of violence or the robbing of banks. They were just views that challenged the status quo. I submit to you that we are at precisely that moment in American politics right now, and that law enforcement has targeted the right as extremists and for political reasons, and they do this in the name of democracy. This is what makes my blood boil about Merrick Garland. We the people matter as long as we the people think like you do, and if we don't, we're extremists. Excuse my language, but fuck you. I mean, seriously? And I'm sorry to say that if you've got your family people on, but your kids need to hear that sometimes there are things that are worth being disgusted about, and there are things that are worth fighting for.
That's absolutely right. With one clarification, we might be at that moment, except for the fact that we are no longer in an era technologically that will allow us to simply go into an FBI building and find documents and bring them with us. We live in a highly technological.
That's Snowden and company. Right now
if we could go easily into that, that would take us more hours.
Question: Where's the next? Where the next Eric Snowden is going to be the person who? And I'm making an appeal to you if you're out there. Eric Snowden.
Edward Snowden.
Excuse me. Brought to light a lot that the government was doing that we would never know about. Same with Julian Assange. What's going on now? I mean, there are documents being held, secrets being kept, and somebody in one of those agencies knows where they are and they know how to disclose them. Where are you? Where's the whistleblower that we need to shed light on this?
That's right. Well, and then where's the confidence for a whistleblower to do so within, I guess, an institutional climate like we have right now, Norm?
They're probably afraid that they'll be called a threat to democracy and locked up for 20 years because there are secrets that people can't know.
That's
We
right.
don't know what our government is doing to us.
That's 100% correct. 100% correct. We don't have to guess at that. Okay. Well, look, we are a few minutes over time, but one more time, everybody can join me in saying happy birthday to you. We are live every day here at 8 a.m. Most days we're right on time. Some days Norm's computer is a little slow. It will tell him that it's a
Some
time.
days the deep state tries to direct me to Russia.
3 minutes is a long time. But most days we're live right at 8 a.m. Eastern here on Rumble Video, YouTube, as well as on X at LawPod Daily. Please do, if you have already followed us on X at LawPod Daily, thank you. Please repost our live broadcasts. Maybe turn some people on to our channel there. I sense personally that X is becoming, I guess, the most important platform that we can build a presence on, Norm, simply because we're watching what's going on with the likes of Russell Brand and otherwise with the outside platforms. You've got birthdays all over the place flying here.
You're a new name. I put that up there just to acknowledge you. Thanks for coming along. Come back. Not every day is my birthday, but today is.
High Society says, good morning and happy birthday to Norm. Jackson Barrett says, happy birthday to you, Norm. Aperture of My Soul, happy birthday, Norm. We've got people, MDMA for PTSD shares a birthday with you. It's also his birthday today. So happy birthday to you, Norm. He is actually 49. So he's got you by a year.
How many years has he been 49?
As many as you've been 50, though, probably,
Wow.
at least that. And then, of course, over here on YouTube, thank you, everybody. We've had a really active chat on both of these platforms today. We always appreciate that. T-Girl and I seem to be in a mind meld over on Rumble. Very weird. When I started talking about Garland's character arc over the last several years, I tuned over to Rumble and saw that in the chat she was making the same supposition as I was. And I had to clarify as to whether, she said that sort of as I was asking, or after, or before. She said way before. I was like, good Lord. So I think, I enjoy what we do here, Norm. And I guess part of why I'm just rambling here is that, your birthday is a time to just, it's about you. But again, I appreciate you, right? Your birthday means something because it, to me, because somehow along the way, the stars aligned and you and I intersected in our
I'm grateful for that. Thank you.
And what we're doing here, what you and I are able to get up every morning and attempt to bring to people who are willing to sit around and listen to us and to engage. It's really fulfilling for me personally as a young attorney, as a young father and husband. It means a lot to be able to reflect on the American ideals, these things that we established long ago, the effort and sacrifice that generations before us made to give us the ability to do this, to ensure that there were safeguards to these liberties that are inherent to every individual on this soil. And so I appreciate that, Norm. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for fighting so zealously and taking your duties as a lawyer, as a fiduciary, as a officer of the court, and as a man. So seriously, I'm humbled to be as connected to you as I am. And I think that most people are starting to see your light the way I do. So happy birthday, Norm.
Thanks for all the greetings, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll be a day older, but no wiser. But you are wiser. Spread the word today. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Merrick Garland's got to go.
He does indeed. Find us on, I guess, all the podcast platforms as well. You know how to find those. 5 stars, good comment, or leave us alone. I've got to go do some other stuff that isn't as fun as this. So we'll get back to this tomorrow morning. See you then, Norm.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye, everyone.